Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by The Athletic. I'm tired. Australia in cricket last night got bowled out for 177, and it's NBA trade deadline day. I'm very, very, very tired. I'm going on 4 hours of sleep, but we're going to rock it anyway. Joining me is Mark Schindler. He's in the building. We're going to talk about everything that happened after the Russell Westbrook deal yesterday. If you want my thoughts on the Russell Westbrook 3-team deal for the Los Angeles Lakers, you can go and listen to the 40 minutes that Cole Huff and I talked about it yesterday. We will still touch on it a bit today because the Lakers made some other additional moves, and I'll probably ask Mark for his take on the deal as a whole. But if you're looking for more of a deep dive on that trade, I would say go back through the archives. I do know that a lot of people in the YouTube comments, Mark, though, are commiserating with you in this moment of sadness in your life. Terry Taylor has unfortunately been waived by the Indiana Pacers. I know that's the biggest move of the day, and I know that you need to talk about it, Mark. I mean,
it is pretty
get into
it. Full stop. It is kind of a bummer because this dude was like awesome to watch last year. Just has never really gotten a super steady run with the team, and understandably the way things have worked out. But yeah, I'm hopeful that he gets another shot sometime moving along. The even bigger thing, George Hill is a Pacer again, and he did not get cut. They did waive Serge Ibaka already, but I mean, man, bring the boys back together. Trade. Well, you can't trade for him now, but get Rudy Gay. That's what I wanted in 2013. So, you know what? It's gonna all come together and gel back again. Bring back Roy. I'm sure he can still block a few shots. So, yeah, this has been today has been crazy. Honestly, you mentioned you are on 4 hours of sleep. That's about to be me tomorrow because I'm working on like the two biggest projects in my work life right now, and naturally, I spent most of today just refreshing Twitter. So, I will be up late tonight and into the early morning. So, yeah, I'm excited to dive in because I have a lot of thoughts.
Okay, so order of operations for people that are looking for specific things, right? We're going to talk about the Kevin Durant deal first. Within that, we'll probably end up hitting on the Darius Baisley, Dario Saric thing. Then we're going to get into the Lakers' continued overhaul of the roster that happened today. Then we're going to talk Jakob Poeltl and whatever in the world the Toronto Raptors are doing. Then we're going to get into Josh Hart going to the Knicks. Then the weird James Wiseman move where the Warriors have finally admitted defeat and the Detroit Pistons continue to accumulate former top 5 picks that are disappointing big men. Next, we're going to go to the weird Matisse Thybulle, Jalen McDaniels deal and try and figure out what the Blazers are doing. Then we're going to go to Jae Crowder finally getting his wish to go to Milwaukee. Then we're going to talk about the Clippers, try to figure out what they're doing. We're going to get to Eric Gordon, obviously, within that, finally getting his move away from Houston. Finally, we'll hit on some of the smaller things like the Devontae Graham cap dump, Mike Muscala going to Boston, everything like that. That is a mouthful. Okay, are you ready, Mark?
Yes, let's get it going.
Okay, I don't know if you heard. Overnight, the Phoenix Suns acquired Kevin Durant and TJ Warren for Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jae Crowder, 4 unprotected first-round picks, and a 2028 first-round pick swap. It's hard to overemphasize how big of a deal this is. I have gone back through and tried to figure out historically where this deal falls in terms of the biggest NBA trade deadline move in history, essentially.
It's up there.
And it is, I think, all due respect to James Harden going to Brooklyn, all due respect to Carmelo Anthony going to the Knicks, I believe that this Kevin Durant deal is the biggest trade that has happened at the deadline since 1965. Do you know who got dealt in 1965?
Is that Wilt?
Wilt Chamberlain, after the Philadelphia Warriors moved to the San Francisco Warriors and eventually became the Golden State Warriors. That team essentially got sold for $850,000 in 1965. The entire team got sold for $850,000. That's less than a minimum deal in today's NBA. And that team got sold. It didn't go super well for Wilt in the Bay Area. The owner was quoted as saying the fans never really grew to love Wilt, and the franchise had some financial problems. So they traded Wilt Chamberlain back to Philadelphia, this time to go to the newly relocated 76ers franchise that came from Syracuse. Wilt Chamberlain was leading the NBA in scoring at that time. It's the only time, I believe, that a scoring leader has been dealt mid-season. And that is very equivalent to what happened here. I would have had Kevin Durant as my 2022-23 mid-season MVP, as I talked about earlier in January with Jason Timpf on the MVP voting mid-season show that we did. Kevin Durant has been phenomenal this year. He has been absolutely incredible. He is still at his peak. He is still in his prime. He's averaging over his last 20 games, where the Nets went on an absurd 18-2 run, 30.7 rebounds, 5 assists, while shooting like 59% from the field, 43% from three, 96% from the line. Do you know what Kevin Durant is shooting from the mid-range this year, Mark?
It's over 50%. Like,
he is shooting 57% from the mid-range. Do you know what the second best player in the league is shooting right now?
Ooh, I'm trying to think who the second is. Is it? It's not. The CP is not up there this year.
He's 11th.
Yeah, I was gonna say I know that he's up there, but he wasn't at the top. Is it Jokic that's there?
Jokic is also very high. It's actually D'Angelo Russell, who we might talk about later on today, shooting 51%. Kevin Durant is 6 points clear percentage-wise of any player in the league in terms of mid-range. If you get him a shot between 3 and 16 feet, he is shooting 60.5% on those shots. That's basically what like an average power forward shoots at the rim, like in the half court. It is bonkers. He has essentially made mid-range shots layups. That's how absurd Kevin Durant has been this season. The Phoenix Suns have this guy now with Devin Booker, with Chris Paul, with DeAndre Ayton. What was your immediate thought when this deal went down?
Well, I didn't have one because my dumbass went to sleep at about 11:45 last night. So I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go use the bathroom. And then I was up until about 6 because I was just like trying to wrap my head around all this, getting back to people on things with respect to the trade. I mean, first and foremost, I don't want to say that I wasn't expecting it, but just, I mean, all signs were indicating that this was something that was going to be put off until the summer. Yep. Brooklyn had obviously made the deal with the idea of staying in contention this year. I think for the Nets, like, it's a pretty good haul back. I don't think that this is like, I mean, obviously it's Kevin Durant, so you would, like, I'd have to pull up in front of me what it's compared to the James Harden deal. Like, I think this is obviously less than what you got for Harden, but also noting, like, you get Mikal Bridges, who is an incredibly good young player who has made really massive strides this year as a scorer and just as an overall offensive player, while also being an all-world, all defense caliber guy.
For what it's worth, I think this is very clearly more than Houston got for Harden.
Yeah, no, I just think in terms of what you're talking about with like picks, it's only the 3 first-rounders.
No, it's
like,
4. They got.
Oh, it's 4. Oh, I misread it. Yeah. So yeah, yes. Oh wait, yeah, never mind. I did misread that. Well, yeah, exactly. I do think this is really good value for the way everything's playing out.
Yeah.
Before I talk about actual fit, I just want to say, man, pour one out for Mikal Bridges, because like this is one of those ones where to me, that's so tough, man. Like I cannot imagine being him. Like he is. Most importantly, it's Kevin freaking Durant. You trade pretty much anything for that guy, but also like Mikal has been here since the beginning, like since this team sucked. Like I think he was either on the 13-win team or or not 13, the 17-win team, or the team that got drafted because of that, and has grown as they become this team. So like I can't imagine emotionally, dealing with that. That would be pretty wild. But also, I have no qualms about them making this trade. The one thing that I do kind of hate is Cam Johnson got the clipping of his of his in his knee so that he could come back and play this year instead of getting the full on surgery and missing the rest of the season. Again, that's part of what happens, but that just sucks, man. Like things happen quickly. But I mean, just in terms of this overall, like you can have whatever questions you do about depth, because I certainly do. That's part of why I like them getting TJ Warren back, which sneakily, like I think, that's good. He hasn't fully gotten back to who he is. Part of that's been what his role was on Brooklyn. I think there's a chance for him to have a bigger role here. But also like that's part of the cyclical nature. Like part of them becoming the team that they became was the TJ Warren trade, moving in a different direction. And now, oh, hey, TJ Warren is back. He's here. Just kind of hilarious how things work out. But I mean, you have Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Chris Paul. And notably, yes, Chris Paul has not had, obviously he's been much better of late offensively. He hasn't been the same guy this year. He's still been very good recently. Book is like just now coming back and working back into the fold. You add Kevin Durant on top of that. Like, yes, you're going to have some kind of fall off at the point of attack with Mikal gone. Like that goes without saying. But I think you add Kevin Durant and what he brings as a defender on top of what can be, I don't think it's going to be on paper like the league's best offense or anything. But when you have three guys all that caliber as scorers, I mean, that's really impressive. And I almost would argue that Booker is going to be the most important part of this, especially as he took over a lot more offensive usage this year. I should say initial offensive usage. It's not that his usage shifted all that much, but it's more like, a lot of things were being run for him or going through him. And I do wonder I would imagine it's going to change. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. But again, like with what the sheer talent is, I think this is, to me, with where this team is at right now, with how things had been trending with Chris and where they're at, I think this is a home run move that I would probably do 10 times out of 10. And again, to me, the biggest thing is going to be DeAndre Ayton. He's been the biggest bellwether for them this entire season. He's had stretches where he's been awesome.
Yep.
He's had stretches where he's been, frankly, just listless and kind of terrible. They need him to not be that. Like, they need him to be the player that he was in the first round of the playoffs last year. And just in general, like what he was last year. Like, he was fantastic last year. They need him to get back to that. Otherwise, I think this is a more moot point in what we're talking about, because this is a team that wants to contend for a title. If they get DeAndre Ayton back to that level, then I have all the confidence in this team being arguably the best team in the West. Obviously, the Nuggets are there. I think I would still pick them over where Phoenix is at right now. But I mean, this is a massive upgrade, and they were starting to, they were hitting the point of really needing to hit it. Obviously, they've been a little bit better since Booker got back. But yeah, this absolutely massive move that kind of destroyed my brain when I woke up this morning.
With Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, and Devin Booker healthy, I think this is very clearly the favorite in the West. I don't even really think it's all that close. I actually don't know how you stop them on offense. All that DeAndre Ayton has to do now is just roll hard to the rim. Like, we can say that like he might not do that, right? Like, he does have a tendency to like to kind of float in the mid post a little bit and kind of, after he sets a screen, kind of hang out a little bit. If he just rolls hard to the rim, there are going to be so many open opportunities for him. And there are going to be, you have to respect him as a roller because he's so big. He's so strong. He is, when he wants to be, very physical in terms of the way that he can just move guys. Like, he doesn't always use it, but when he wants to, he can. The thing with Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant is that they're also multiple in the way that they get their shots, right? There's not really a way to stop, just in general, there's not really a way to stop Kevin Durant, right? The way that Boston did it last year is to throw three guys on him, two guys on him, stop him from getting to the spots he wants, stop him from getting the ball basically, and then like double teaming him every time. And they could do that because Brooklyn didn't have anybody else at that point other than Kyrie. Like, there was just no offensive weapon that they really had to worry about. You can't do that with Phoenix now. Like, Devin Booker and Chris Paul are there, and those two are just lethal as shooters. If you leave them open, it's going to go. Like, there's just not really another way to say it. And Kevin Durant's good enough at hitting those kickouts now that he's going to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. Some stuff from the story that I wrote today on Kevin Durant, basically saying why I would have made this same bet. We had David in the YouTube comments, I think fairly ask, is there enough mid-range space for Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Chris Paul to exist? I personally think there is, because all three of them can really space out from behind the 3-point line. It's obviously not necessarily where they want to get their pull-up shots, but all three of them can really knock down catch and shoot opportunities. And on top of it, I don't think the ball is going to be all that hard to share with that group. So Kevin Durant so far averages 67 touches per game this season. That is just 43rd in the NBA. That's insane if you think about it, that he's averaging 30 points a game and he's just 43rd in touches. That's a top 10 scorer in the NBA in terms of points per touch. He's just 96th in the NBA in terms of dribbles per touch. He's outside of the 50 or the top 50 in the NBA in terms of time of possession. He has no problem playing off the ball. He has no problem, acting and trying to get his spots in the mid-range, trying to get his spots on the block and finding that little open area. He's going to be able to do that. The other thing is, you mentioned that this is going to be really, really big for Devin Booker. He's going to have to kind of manage this. I think there's going to be enough ball for him, but more than anything, Devin Booker's had the hardest guy on the perimeter defending him every season of his career, basically, right? Mm-hmm. At this point, all due respect to Chris Paul, all due respect to Mikal Bridges, other guys that have been in Phoenix, Devin's been the guy that other teams try and sell out and stop, right? You now have to put your best defender on Kevin Durant. Devin Booker's great, don't get me wrong. Kevin Durant's better. And that means the second best defender on a team, not the best defender on a team, is now going to be guarding Devin Booker. Probably the third best perimeter defender on a team is now going to be guarding Chris Paul. That trickle-down effect in terms of role allocation is real. And it's been real throughout Kevin Durant's career. If you look at what his teammates have shot around him when Kevin Durant is on the court, go back to Brooklyn. In the 3 years that he played with Kyrie Irving, these are all per play-by-play stats, Daryl Blackport's great site. Kyrie Irving had a 58.3 effective field goal percentage with Kevin Durant on the court. Without Durant, he had a 55 effective field goal percentage. Nick Claxton with Kevin Durant off the court had a 64 effective field goal percentage. When Kevin Durant was on the court, he had a 75 effective field goal percentage. Joe Harris shot better. Patty Mills got better. The same effect happened in Golden State too. Stephen Curry had a 61.2 effective field goal percentage when Durant was on the court and just a 57.3 effective field goal percentage when he was off the court. Klay Thompson had a 57.6 effective field goal percentage with Durant, 55.3 without him. Draymond Green was 52.4 with him, 46.7% without him. Every single place Kevin Durant has gone, he's made it way easier on his teammates. That's going to happen in Phoenix. Devin Booker's never actually had it easy in his career. He's now going to have it easier. And that's a really, really important part of this, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think to me, again, a lot's just going to be on, and not, I think it's unfair to call Booker a ball stopper, but I do think this is going to be a big test for him, because I do think we saw maybe not quite as much last year, but especially when you go back to what the title run was against the Bucks, when the Bucks were just okay, well, we're just going to let Devin Booker score. We're going to cut everything else off and say, we're going to be willing to play you one-on-one, make or miss shots. The reads are going to be there for you to make. And I think that I feel that he has improved in a lot of how he reads the game in some ways, but I will be really interested to see how teams approach that moving forward. Because like you mentioned, it's how do you guard all three? We know we're going to see a lot of switching against them just based on every way that teams have approached Chris Paul. So I think they're going to be, not that I think that they're necessarily defeatable just because of a matchup, but I do think matchup dependency is going to be really big for them as well.
So let's talk about the three things that could come up, right? So injuries is the big one, right? Kevin Durant and Devin Booker haven't played in a while, right? This is worth noting on some level. It's important for them to get healthy. This team can't win the title unless they're healthy, right? Mm. Chris Paul has obviously also had real injury concerns in terms of soft tissue injuries, especially in the back half of his career. So Chris Paul needs to stay healthy. The second thing here, and this is more where I can tag you in, I think the injuries are just like kind of a reality of this deal that we don't need to discuss. What do you feel about the lack of rim pressure that this team is going to create? I mean, the Suns over this little 3-year run that they've had, they don't really put pressure on the rim. You know, they've been bottom 5 in free throw attempt rate. They've been bottom 5 in attempt rate at the rim in this time. Do we care, or do we just think that like this is fine because they have like 3 of the most multiple like 3-point and mid-range assassins in the NBA in terms of versatility?
I mean, I think it matters still. I don't think that it's something that I'm going to fret about necessarily. I mean, that's because as much as it's important to put pressure on the rim, I think like kind of like we hit on already, I think that's going to be really key for getting that from DeAndre Ayton. Because that has not been his MO this year, frustratingly. But you know, I think to me, like you bring even more, or not even that it's more, but I think you just give different equations for a defense to have to figure out when you have this level of shooting. You know, like we saw last year against the Pelicans. And granted, Pelicans have different personnel this year, so it is a little bit different. But like, yeah, they weren't able to really put pressure on the rim against the Pelicans, but also, okay, the Pelicans had to toggle through every scheme possible because they could do nothing to stop a team that's shooting 50% plus on pull-up twos. And when you add somebody to that is bringing that from outside as well, and like I think that just opens up so much that I'm really interested to see. The biggest thing is just going to be, you know, how do they really try and not that obviously the fifth guy is not going to completely, you know, alter everything, but like I am interested to see if they still start Torrey Craig. Like he's shooting 40% from 3 this year, but like no, teams are going to sag off him. Like obviously he can be very impactful as a cutter and be aggressive on the offensive glass, which maybe that's one way that they try and counter rim pressure. But I honestly wonder if they end up going to like, okay, what if we put, you know, TJ Warren in the starting lineup eventually, or do something different. Just I am really interested to see what they do with that. And obviously they'll probably be aggressive on the buyout market, but like I think I'm not really too worried about the rim pressure, at least right now. I think again, like against teams deeper in the playoffs, I think it'll matter. But
so let's go to that second point. I'm glad that you brought up the fifth guy, right? Because I think that if I was them, the fifth guy would be like pure defense, because otherwise you're going to have one of Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Chris Paul guarding the opposing team's best perimeter player. And that's just not what you want, right? Like Torrey Craig, I think makes sense in this regard. Josh Okogie, I think makes real sense in this regard and has given the team aggressive defensive minutes at the very least so far this season. It's interesting that they went out and acquired Darius Baisley. And I think that this is where we can bring this into the fold, where the Thunder took on Dario Saric's contract for Darius Baisley, and the Suns sent a second-round pick in order to accommodate that. Baisley makes quite a bit less money than Saric does. I would imagine they did that more as a tax avoidance move than anything else, because I think it would save, what did I calculate? I think it would save them quite a bit of money. It saves them a lot of money in terms of luxury tax following the Kevin Durant deal. So do we think Baisley can help them? Like Baisley theoretically makes a lot of sense for this roster as like a bigger 4-man that's athletic on a team in a backcourt that, like, you know, all due respect to Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Chris Paul, not like elite level NBA athletes by explosiveness standards in the league, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, truthfully, I liked this move for them. I admittedly have, I think, been lower on Saric this year than others have been. Like he's shot well recently. He's been better for them since he's played in the starting lineup. But I just think ultimately he's somebody who, even when we saw not this, like during the title run for them, like he was a really important player for them. But I think you saw in the playoffs before he got injured how willing teams were to short close on him. And I think that neutered a lot of his value because he's really not somebody who's going to punish you with drives off the catch. And he's not quite a good enough shooter that I think it's going to matter. So it gets harder to use his what he brings as a playmaker without really getting the most out of him as a popper. So that's not to totally devalue him. I think he does good things, but we've seen this play out before, and I don't think he's the same version of who that guy was. He's really struggled defensively in my viewings.
Yeah.
For me with Baisley, exactly like you mentioned, like I think the shot, I just am probably at the point where I just don't know if Darius' shot is ever going to become real.
Agree.
I wish it would, because that would really change his outlook as a player. But even with this, like I view him as not a starter, but like he's really grown as a defender the last year or two. Like he went from 2 or 3 years ago, he was pretty lost in help and just in space in general, to now where I feel pretty good about him on a lot of matchups. I don't think that he's an all defense defender, but like he can legitimately provide some help side rim protection. He's solid switching on most players. I don't really want to trust him with guards a ton, but he gives you somebody who's got length, who's mobile, who can handle the ball a little bit, who has size in the front court. And it just gives you some versatility that I don't think you you get something with Dario, but I think it's different with what you're getting with Darius. And to his credit too, like he's somebody who is going to play with a lot of force and will be aggressive again, like on the offensive glass. I think if that's what they're trying to embody, being a team that, that fourth or fifth guy is somebody who really is going to be aggressive, and trying to do things on the interior, then I think he makes a lot of sense in that role for them.
Well, and there's one other sneaky part of it too. If he does play some minutes with Kevin Durant's really good at hitting cutters. Like having watched like a crazy amount of tape of Kevin Durant last night to write that thing I wrote. I watched like all of his assists this year, and seeing the way that he recognizes the attention that he draws to himself as a player, and how like all of the eyes on the court basically shift to him when he has the ball. And then watching someone like Joe Harris cut backdoor, watching someone like Nick Claxton kind of just be in the dunker spot and find that little like crease that he can sink into from the dunker spot. I think that that's really, really important for the Suns. Look, DeAndre Ayton can be that guy certainly, but having another one like Darius Baisley that can actually get a little bit more downhill, maybe even as a cutter, could be interesting at the very least. He's definitely a flyer. He's literally never played a basketball game in the NBA that matters.
Hey, he played Thunder Rockets first round. He played 18 minutes per game in that 7-game series. Never forget.
Okay. I forgot. I will admit I forgot that he played in a game.
Bubble Bays. Yeah.
Bubble Bays. We'll go with it. But regardless, this is a different beast than that, because now they're contending, and they're going to need something like this, be it on the buyout market, be it Torrey Craig, be it Josh Okogie. I like what Jock Landale's done for the most part this year. Damian Lee, it feels like, has never missed a shot this season. Like every time I watch the Suns, I feel like he's like 5 for 5 from 3. Mm-hmm. The final issue here, depth is it, right? Like I'm concerned about the depth, right? Like they need to figure out what they can do in terms of accentuating this bench, especially defensively. Like all of the guys that we just talked about, we like Darius Baisley defensively. I agree with you. We don't know what he's going to be in the playoffs. I don't know if I trust Jock Landale in the playoffs yet. Damian Lee has shown certain issues in the playoffs in terms of like potential on defense. Can Josh Okogie and Torrey Craig really kind of carry the versatility load? Can Darius Baisley add to that? Can they find a buyout option, right? Like it's a real question to me. Like I was kind of wondering for them, could they move Saric for like Josh Richardson maybe? Like I think that would have been an interesting idea for them, but Richardson was making probably a little bit too much money. And then the Spurs got a second round pick to take on that Devontae Graham deal. Or could they have, honestly, like given the fact that the Spurs took on that Devontae Graham deal for Josh Richardson, I wonder if the Suns ever called them about taking on the Landry Shamet deal with a second round pick for Josh Richardson, because the Shamet deal is a little bit less than Devontae's and is like expiring next year. If you want it to expire next year, it's a strange structure. So that I think would have been actually a really interesting deal for them.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to talk about this now, but I was a little bit surprised that the Spurs weren't more aggressive and maybe trying to
we'll get to that kind of at the end, because that is John Hollinger and I have been exchanging messages for like the last month trying to figure out how the Spurs are going to spend this money they have. And the fact that they didn't is very interesting. Mm-hmm. So do you want to move to the? So you think you think that the Suns are like the second best team in the West right now, basically after this?
Yeah, I would still have the Nuggets over them just because we know what the Nuggets are playing like right now. I need to see things play out with Phoenix. Like I'm comfortable putting them up high, but yeah, I want to see for sure.
Okay, so let's move to the Nets side. I agree with what you said earlier. I think the Nets did as well as they possibly could have in a situation like this. To get a first round pick for Kyrie Irving, as well as like multiple pieces that now realistically they can probably move for additional value down the road. Like Dorian Finney-Smith is going to be worth a first round pick for them in the summer for sure. Spencer Dinwiddie could be worth like real value for them, I think, on that deal. He's had a pretty okay year for the most part. He's a good player, 6'6", lead guard wing kind of combo player. Has real offensive value. On top of that, they get Mikal Bridges and they get Cam Johnson. And those are two guys that like are worth building around. Or in Mikal's case, I mean, I would imagine you can move him for multiple first round picks tomorrow. Like they could have done that today, I would have thought, right?
Yeah. I'm really interested to see what they do, just because like on one hand, yes, they were able to kind of recoup some of their draft assets a little bit. But they're just in kind of an odd spot, which no shit. They just traded their entire
Offense.
big three's gone after a year. So of course they're going to look different, but yeah, exactly. Like you mentioned, like they don't really have a clear cut, like true prospect. Like obviously I like you mentioned, I think Mikal is very exciting. Somebody that you want to be excited about moving forward. Nick Claxton, I'm really interested on what this means for him. Like, I think some people think that there's like some other gear that's going to unlock right now. And I am a little bit like questioning what that's going to mean necessarily. Like he really looked good and benefited playing off of Kyrie and KD. And not that I think that his value is just going to tank, but I'm interested to see how that plays out for him and what it looks like.
Yeah. Well, like the Nets now have two guys that reasonably I think would have made all defense this year, or at least like had a real shot to make all defense, and Nick Claxton and Mikal Bridges, which, plus Dorian Finney-Smith finished 7th among forwards last year in all defense voting. They have real like defenders that will play hard and will make them miserable to play against right now.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like I think I'm just excited to watch this team because it's one of those teams where like you kind of like the Jazz earlier this season, like you just kind of throw a little bit of like alcohol on something, light it on fire, see what happens. And that's kind of what we're getting in Brooklyn, which is that's enticing to me. Like I always enjoy seeing what that looks like because you have a ton of guys who are going to be in different roles doing different things. So yeah, I'm very interested to see what that looks like.
So they now have Spencer Dinwiddie, they have Mikal Bridges, they have Dorian Finney-Smith. I would imagine those three are your starters around Nick Claxton and Ben Simmons. If Ben Simmons is ever going to be anything in the NBA again, like we thought he could be, this is his chance. Like this is his real opportunity because Spencer is a good ball handler. He's a good creator. He's a good facilitator. He's a good scorer. He needs someone next to him to be able to handle the ball handling load on some level. This is certainly Ben Simmons' chance. If this ends with Ben Simmons coming off the bench because they want to start Cam Johnson when Cam Johnson comes back from his knee injury, I would not be surprised at all. If Ben Simmons decides this is my team now and like tries to be aggressive for the first week and a half here, I don't think that'd surprise me either. Would it surprise you?
Unfortunately, yeah, I think it would kind of surprise me right now. I mean, I'm hopeful that it happens. I would love to see that happen, but just based on what this the last couple of years have been, I'm a little bit skeptical that it will happen. I really want it to. Like, I don't hold the same malice in my heart that I think some people do for Ben.
Oh man, you should see it over here, Mark.
Oh, I'm sure it's awful. I don't want to.
It's rough.
A million reasons for me to not want to live in Australia. That's one of them. So that and like, any kind of bug, snake. Yeah, that's enough for me to hate. But yeah,
have I told you about the spider I found in my garage yet?
Do I want to hear about it? That
We'll
sounds
do
kind of
story
terrifying.
time at the end of the
Okay,
episode.
good. I do want to hear about it so I can again remind myself I'm never moving there.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think this team will probably make the play-in just because they banked enough wins, right?
Mhm.
Like it feels likely that it's gonna be hard for them to get below that level, given how hard they defend, given just how many wins they've already banked. I mean, do we think this team can be like threatening at all? It just feels like it's going to be way too hard for them to score in an offense first league now in the NBA, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say that they're going to be threatening, but I do think they're going to be kind of like you mentioned, like they're going to be scrappy still. Like this is like, I mean, it's like the Nets team that went like 44-38 and was kind of funky in the first round. I think
Yeah.
that's them. That's probably where I'd be at on them. And I obviously, of course, ironically, Spencer Dinwiddie was on that team. So the abundance of catharsis in that, but. Yeah, I think again, like part of, and this is just like another stray thought that I had, but it's one of the things that keeps coming back to me. Like, it's hard to imagine being Jacques Vaughn in this situation either, because like
Yeah.
2 years ago gets past, or I guess it's 3 years ago. I can't remember off the top of my head, but like gets passed over for the Nets job.
Yeah.
Has always just by any account that I've heard, he's awesome dude, really good coach. Gets the job finally this year. They have the best month in franchise history. And now he's kind of just back. All right, well, you have a rebuilding team again. And it's
I
like,
know, right?
That's tough, man. Again, I hate saying it's a business because I don't really love that always tends to imply, but like, it's kind of wild.
Yeah, I mean, look, it kind of is. It's a reality, though. It is a
Yeah.
business. There's just not really another way to say it. And again, like a guy that we didn't even mention here defensively is Royce O'Neal, right? Like Royce has been pretty useful this season for the Brooklyn Nets. I'm surprised, honestly. Like I'm a little bit surprised that the Nets didn't look to move one of, at the very least, Dorian Finney-Smith or Royce O'Neal, let alone like
Well,
explore the market for Mikal Bridges.
it's
Like,
funny too because didn't it get released that DFS was like included in the deal because Kevin Durant really wanted to play with him?
so did that get released?
I believe it got released.
I kind of was, I don't know, like I kind of sneaky got told that was true, that like Kevin likes what Dorian Finney-Smith brings to the table. But yeah, I mean, like it's going to be interesting to see where this Nets team goes now. Like if you are the Nets and the Houston Rockets would have offered you Eric Gordon and multiple first round picks for Mikal Bridges, would you have done that?
Probably not.
What
Like
if they
that's the
offered you the ability to get back your 2024 first round pick, which they own because of the James Harden deal?
I'm
And
not
your
sure.
team
Like I think
looks
because
like
for
it might
me,
be
like
tanking.
I really like Mikal. Like I think Mikal's really good. Like obviously getting back a 2024 pick would be interesting. I haven't done a lot of legwork in what the 2024 draft is going to be, but
Yeah.
I think I would be more in on just keeping Mikal. He's still pretty young. Like his new deal just started too. So
Yeah.
I would definitely keep him.
Yeah. Like if I was Houston, I would have offered 2024 first round pick, 2025 pick swap, like the Nets 2024 first round pick back to them, 2025 pick swap back to Brooklyn, and then I don't know, something else, some other first round pick of value probably in order to get Mikal. Because like the thing that Houston needs, the thing we've been begging Houston for is defensive infrastructure, right? Like that Mikal is instant defensive infrastructure and floor spacing for a young core that desperately needs it. Having said that, if you're Houston, like, look, I probably do that, but like Mikal Bridges, is he worth what could potentially be, I guess, the top 5 pick in the 2024 NBA draft? I don't know. I don't really like that draft class, so maybe. But do you give up that upside? I don't know.
They're hitting a point where I think they need to. But yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting dynamic to look at.
Okay. Let's finish with this on the Nets real quick. Worse than, just like say agree or disagree. Worse than Boston, worse than Milwaukee, worse than Philadelphia, worse than Cleveland. Like undeniably, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Worse than Miami, worse than the Knicks, right?
Yeah.
Worse than Atlanta.
TBD, man. I have thoughts on what Atlanta did today too. And they've just been, they've been a little bit better recently, but I still just I have very minimal faith in what that team is right now.
Yeah.
I think that ultimately Atlanta probably beats them in a playoff series, but I think for the regular season, if they finished above Atlanta, I wouldn't be super shocked.
After the Jakob Poeltl deal, worse than Toronto?
See, that one I really need to see because I have a lot of thoughts on the Poeltl move as well, but I really want to see how it plays out because that one's I can envision some stuff, but I really want to see how they click or if they do click.
Chicago is, something like 6 games behind them. Chicago's the one. I think Chicago would beat them in a playoff series right now. Yeah. Personally, I think that DeMar and Zach would figure it out, but I think it'd be a miserable series that would be miserable to watch because, they can throw so many different bodies at Chicago and then, they can't really score on Chicago's defense on the other end. It would be kind of rough. But Brooklyn, I think is somewhere in that 9 to 13 range right now. And Indiana's getting better when Tyrese Halliburton, gets back to full strength at the very least. Orlando is certainly rising within the Eastern Conference. And Detroit, I think they hope to rise. We'll see whether or not that ends up being the case. We'll talk about that momentarily. But I don't know. I feel like Brooklyn is in a difficult spot unless they make a move for an actual player, realistically moving an actual offensive lead creator, unless Ben Simmons makes this turn or Spencer Dinwiddie goes supernova here moving forward. But they need offense. It's an offense first league. We need to be realistic about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think again, what their summer looks like is going to be really interesting for me. Because they have a lot that they can do in the summer for sure. And I think that they need to.
Well, they have motivation to, because as we said, Houston owns all of their 2023 through 2020 would be 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, and 2027 NBA drafts. They own them all. So, the good news is that they now own the Suns NBA drafts, but that team looks good for the near future. So we'll see what it looks like. Okay, let's take a quick commercial break. We'll be back and we're going to dive into the rest of the Lakers moves and the rest of everything else that's happened. Okay, Mark. I've talked a bit about the D'Angelo Russell, the Jared Vanderbilt, Malik Beasley deal already for Russell Westbrook. I think it was the right move for them. The more I've thought about it since then, the more I even think it was the right move for them. The Lakers today also went out and moved Thomas Bryant for Devon Reed and 3 second-round picks. So they basically get back the cost that they spent to acquire Rui Hachimura. They moved Patrick Beverly for Mo Bamba as well. I believe that they also sent a 2nd-round pick to Orlando to be able to do that. All told, they acquire Mo Bamba, Rui Hachimura, D'Angelo Russell, Jared Vanderbilt, Malik Beasley, and Davon Reed, as well as I think ended up plus 2 second-round picks minus 1 first-round pick. Overall, this is definitely a better Lakers team now, right?
Oh, definitely. I think without question, this team is much better.
So what are your thoughts? I'll just give you the floor very briefly. I don't know that I need to talk about it a ton more. What were your thoughts on the D'Angelo Russell for Russell Westbrook along with Mike Conley maneuver?
Frankly, I was kind of surprised that the Lakers were given this option. Like I don't know if I would have for Utah. I do think some people were maybe expecting probably more back for Vanderbilt and Beasley than should have been. Like I don't think that either guy was going into a first round pick on their own, based on like any reporting that had been released.
Mhm.
But just from the Lakers front, like I think part of what's interesting, like not that I think D'Lo was like guaranteed to work in Minnesota, but he'd really started to find something over the last month or two, moving off the ball more. He's found his shot in a way that had, like we've talked about this. He found his shot in a way that just hasn't been there since that All-Star season in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge. Like playing alongside LeBron, like again, a guy who I think combo guards are meant to thrive off LeBron James.
Yep.
Like you have guys who can shoot, who can really get things going. Like yes, they can bring the ball up, but okay, then they can move off the ball. And I think with what D'Lo was finding over this last month, that excites me about what that can look like. With the Lakers.
Well, let's stop there because I think that's a really, really important point. Russell's best years and best moments in the NBA have come when he shares the load as an initiator, right?
Mm-hmm.
His 2019 season where he made the All-Star game, that came sharing the offensive initiation load with Spencer Dinwiddie, right? As we've talked about on the show, and as you brought up, at length when we broke down the Timberwolves 2 weeks ago, I guess that was, the Timberwolves have really used Kyle Anderson to initiate a lot of their actions over the course of the last month. Plus, Anthony Edwards is taking on a more substantial part of the load, which has freed up D'Angelo Russell to just be able to go play, right? Mm-hmm. Like when D'Angelo can just go play and has freedom and like doesn't have to worry about initiating and like making plays for everyone. That's where his creativity, I think, really thrives. Like he's a really creative passer in those moments. It's more when like he has to figure out, okay, I have to like set the table for this guy. I have to get this guy the stuff in the right spots. Like with LeBron, he doesn't have to worry about any of that. He can just go play. And I think that's really smart.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot for him as a fit move forward. Like obviously the defensive issues are going to exist, but
we're going to talk about that.
Yeah. But from an offensive standpoint, I really like that. And they needed the juice just to get better with that. As for the Jazz fit too, like I really liked trading for Vando and Beasley together, because they have obviously synergy from playing in Utah, but also playing in Minnesota with their 2-man game. So I think in some ways, like you automatically bring that in. And I like that. I think Vando gives him a lot of interesting stuff that he can do defensively, primarily, guarding guys on the ball. I think part of, and this is just my assumption, but I think part of trading Thomas Bryant was because they weren't going to be able to resign him this summer, or weren't super interested in resigning him just for what the dollar might end up costing. But mainly, I think you open up more minutes for Jared Vanderbilt to play. And I think the idea too, like this, to me, is a lot about getting them to become much more of a defensive focused team that can get out in transition, while also, of course, shoring some things up in the half court. And I think that's perfect for what Vando brings. Even when he's playing alongside, like I think lineups with him and AD together, that's going to be wonky at times. But I think you just open up some more stuff to actually make that more possible. So I like that. I like adding all three guys. Again, Malik Beasley is like a system breaking bad defender at times, but having AD and Jared Vanderbilt on there together helps. So yeah.
So I have numbers on that, by the way. So Malik Beasley and D'Angelo Russell, they played together in the 2021 and 2022 NBA seasons. They played more than 1,200 minutes together for the Minnesota Timberwolves. What do you think Minnesota's defensive rating was when they played together in those 1,200 minutes?
I'm sure it was awful. I have no idea on a guess, but I'm sure it was awful.
116.1 per play-by-play stats, which would have been third worst in 2021 and second worst in 2022.
That sounds about right.
It was really, really bad. Like there's a lot of work to be done covering up for that if they're going to play those two together in the starting lineup. Like you can't play those two and Rui in the starting lineup, which is like some of the speculation I've seen. That is a nightmare waiting to happen. And Darvin Ham has not been good enough managing their rotations. And that's another thing we're going to talk about momentarily here.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if they stop starting Rui, because I would start Vanderbilt over Rui. I know that some people might disagree with that. Like, yes, you can theoretically get Rui shooting, but I just think Vando's a way better player right now. I'll be interested to see what they do, but yeah, they have. I think to me, it's like they have a lot more options. I still don't think that I would consider them a title contender. Like, I think that they're a playoff team now, which is an upgrade, and gives them a puncher's chance. But yeah, I'm very I'm interested to see how it plays out, but still pretty skeptical about what this is going to look like.
Yeah, so I agree with you that I don't think they're really a contender for a title right now, but I'll get into the reason why after we kind of talk a little bit more about like the fit, right? Like, the thing this did more than anything is give them shooters.
Yeah.
Like, having someone like D'Angelo Russell, who's like a 38, 39% 3-point shooter, is enormous for them. Having Malik Beasley, who can be a 38, 39% 3-point shooter, is enormous for them. They desperately needed the floor spacing. On top of it today, they add Mo Bamba, who teams don't really guard out there. Like, if Mo Bamba is going to shoot, teams are pretty good with that. Like, they think that's a good result. It's better, for instance, for Mo Bamba to shoot than LeBron James or Anthony Davis get a shot, right?
Yeah.
So he does make 38 to 39% of his threes over the last 2 years, though, even if he doesn't get guarded out there. So it's another potentially interesting floor spacing option. Rui's not really a shooter, obviously, and Jared Vanderbilt's certainly not a shooter. But what Vanderbilt does do, I'm glad you brought up the idea of like being a chess piece defensively. They're going to need that. They're going to need to play him on the ball defensively, I think, quite a bit now. I actually did not like the Mo Bamba for Patrick Beverley move. I think it saved them just like an insane amount of money, if I remember correctly. Like, it saved them a lot of money against the luxury tax. But this team does not have any real great, like, guys in their rotation that are point of attack defenders. Like, Max Christie's done a pretty okay job of it this year, but he's just not going to play, I don't think. Like, Darvin Ham's not going to play him. Mm-hmm. Dennis Schroeder can be aggressive and active, I guess, but Dennis isn't good at it, I would say. Austin Reeves, I think, is better as a team defender who is rotating around and, making the right reads on that side of the court, as opposed to like being like an aggressive, disruptive point of attack defender. Then you get to Malik Beasley and D'Angelo Russell. D'Angelo Russell is one of the worst players in the NBA at like fighting through screens, to the point where Minnesota basically completely adjusted its defensive scheme, playing him as like a backline weak side communicator almost, where he was, basically calling out coverages and staying on like the opposing team's worst offensive player in order to hide him, essentially. Anytime he has to get through screens, it does not go well.
Yeah.
He's going to kind of have to do that now, I feel like, don't you?
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what they do. Because I mean, to be fair too, I don't think Pat Bev's defense has been very good this year. Like, granted, it's miles better than what you're getting from D'Angelo, but
right.
I think it's still been like, just compared to where even last year, I think it's been a little bit of a fall off. Part of that too has just been how much they've had to ask him to cover guys because they haven't anybody who can do it. So again, like, I think that's why they're really going to need to get the most out of Vanderbilt, because I don't know who else is doing it for them necessarily.
Yeah. Vanderbilt's legit going to have to guard like opposing like lead initiators, it feels like, a lot of the time for them. And it's going to be interesting for them. Yeah. Like,
ironically, what's kind of fun about that is that, at least for me, Vando's like breakout game for me. And it was the year before the Wolves made the playoffs. It was the year that they hired Chris Finch mid-season. I think it was before he got hired. Yeah. Vando had a game where he guarded LeBron, I think, almost the entire game. And that was during the bubble year, before the bubble happened, obviously. And that was like the first game where it's like, okay, I think Vando's going to be legit.
And the one that confirmed it for me last year was it was like in January, Anthony Simons was like hammering them. And Finch just like told Jared Vanderbilt, guard Anthony Simons 70 feet and annoy the shit out of him. And he did. And he just like completely changed the complexion of the game. Eric Stafford in the YouTube comments says, Christie or Dennis was just as effective as Pat Bev at the point of attack. Yeah, but Christie's not going to play is the problem. I don't disagree. Christie's just not going to play. Like, I don't see a world where Darvin Ham plays him. And we'll talk about why my main concern with this Lakers team moving forward is Darvin Ham. But I don't disagree necessarily that Dennis was just as good. He's just not effective either. And I guess like Pat Bev wasn't that effective, but he does at least like really fight and scratch in a way that Dennis doesn't necessarily always fight and scratch. Like I can trust him to like really battle. It feels like to fight through screens at like a real level. Let me mention here the Darvin Ham part of this. I think he's been really bad this year. I talked about that, I feel like, on the last episode, and I've talked about it at length, I feel like. Darvin Ham and his lineup construction has been one of the biggest hindrances to the Lakers this season. The lineups that he was playing, it's almost impossible to play this small in today's NBA. Like, I was kind of wondering at first why they didn't just take Mike Conley instead of D'Angelo Russell. The more I thought about it, the more I was sold on Russell for them. I think it was probably the right call for a number of reasons. But the Lakers this season have played over half of their minutes with at least two players that are 6'3" or shorter. They've played 800 minutes with two players 6'1" or shorter on the court. And they've even played 230 minutes with three players that are 6'3" or shorter on the court. That is just like, it's hard to do that. And they have options. Like, you can play Austin Reeves more. You can play Lonnie Walker more. Not to say Lonnie Walker's like much bigger, but he's at least 6'4" stronger and like has real length at the very least. Like, I don't understand what Darvin Ham is doing, first and foremost. I don't think he's done a very good job in terms of managing his rotations. I really wonder if trading Patrick Beverley, as much as anything, was just taking a club out of the bag for Darvin Ham to not play two 6'1" guys, two lead initiators, quote unquote, at once. Their strategy this year has been horrendous. Their rotational like adjustments throughout the season have been horrendous. That he is the biggest hindrance to this Lakers team being a contender right now. We'll see if that changes. Maybe it's a little bit easier for him now that he has real size that he can go to with Russell, with Baisley, with X, Y, and Z, Jared Vanderbilt, Mo Bamba, etc. Right? I haven't seen enough this year though to make me think otherwise.
Yeah, maybe I'm being too forgiving, but like I have some of the same concerns, but I just think part of it's just been I'm probably less high on what the roster is in terms of the actual versatility throughout it. Like, yeah, Troy Brown's 6'6", but the shots, like, he's still not really getting guarded like a shooter. A lot of it just feels theoretical to me in what the roster actually is, or what it was.
But like he's not going to play Austin Reeves. Like, that's my biggest worry. Like, he has all these like veteran guards and wings now, right? He's just like not going to. I feel like he's not going to play Austin Reeves, and I'm going to lose my mind because Reeves is like one of the only guys on their court that is good on both ends of the floor and can be reliable, like doing two things, offense and defense at once.
Yeah, him not playing has been kind of weird. I haven't really understood that. I mean, I do think it's going to be better. Again, maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but I'm not. I definitely don't have quite the same worry level. Yeah.
The last thing about this deal, the reason that this deal I think ultimately makes a lot of sense, and the reason that this number and this overall picture of acquisitions makes sense is that they have so much flexibility now in the summer. They're going to have like actual cap space if they want it. They're going to be able to get to max cap space pretty easily now, or at least like very, very close to max cap space if they want that moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Or because they have all of these guys that have either high cap holds or they have options on deals, basically, like Malik Beasley has a $14.5 million team option, I believe. Mo Bamba, I think, has a non-guaranteed year at like $10 million. They also have the flexibility to act as an over-the-cap team this summer, which I think allows them to be able to have a real chance to like maybe build around this core if they decide they want to build around this core, or move on if they want to and start anew entirely. And if they build around this core and act as an over the cap team, they have like $60 million or so to play with while still also having access to the full mid-level exception. Like if you can get D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Austin Reeves, and one of Mo Bamba or Rui Hachimura under contract for $60 million, your core is actually pretty set then moving forward. Then you can move, at least if this goes well, let's say your core would be set. And then you can also add using the full mid-level. So it's at least the long-term planning here by the Lakers front office is the most foresight that I've seen from the Lakers front office in a while. And that is worth commending, I think, at the very least.
Yeah, they're certainly trying to have foresight, so I can appreciate that.
That's fucking savage. I love it.
Well, I'm not trying to be unfair. I just we'll see what happens in free agency. I still just like this whole year, like, congrats on having some things work out now, but I think you could have seen this not working before the year started. So it's been a little bit of like a congrats on digging out of your own shithole. You're back on level playing field.
Okay, let's move on from the Lakers. It's time to go full Windhorst. What is going on in Toronto, Mark Schindler? What is going on in Toronto?
Yeah.
They were rumored to break up this team for weeks and months. They didn't break up any of the team. And in fact, they bought at the deadline. They acquired Jakob Poeltl for Kem Birch in a first-round pick. What is going on in Toronto? You tell me, Mark.
I mean, based on everything that came out today, it seems like they did not feel they were going to get back the value that they wanted in a trade for OG or for any of their players, frankly. And it feels like they're just kind of putting this off till summer, while also opening up the chance of, okay, if we bring in somebody who is pretty good right now, pretty valuable right now, does that change up what what the remainder of our season looks like and then better position us for the summer? On one hand, I get it. On the other hand, I'm just kind of tired. Like, before even just talking about the actual deal, because I did like the deal for them value-wise, but like, we're hearing these reports for reasons. It's not just agents trying to drum shit up. Like, there's very real credence to everything that's being reported out of Toronto. So on one hand, I'm like, just like, okay, I would really prefer to just like see this get done with, because I'm tired of hearing about it all the time. From an actual on-court perspective, like, I think I'm just so fascinated to see how this plays out, because part of what has made them successful offensively of late has been moving Scotty to be their primary screener and do a ton for them off the short roll and put the ball in his hands by not always having him start with the ball. And I think that's been really beneficial for him. I like what Jakob can bring to their offense as just an overall hub that they haven't had, which, except with what Scotty's been doing. And just adding
explain what makes Jakob so good.
Well, Jakob's one of the probably 5 best screeners in the NBA. Yeah. He's a really good DHO partner. He's really good at just opening things up in general. He's so good at positioning himself in the paint and moving with a ball handler to keep himself open, to give an outlet, which is an underrated thing that frankly, the Raptors just don't really have. Like, they don't have guys who are tall that tall, I should say. Guys who are who are 7 feet tall, that have touch, that can make people worry if you leave them open out to 7 or 8 feet. Like, it seems like a small thing, but it actually matters quite a bit. And then defensively, I think like his defense has been up and down in San Antonio this year, but part of that's who he's been playing with, to be fair. And he's looked better since he took a little bit of time off from the ankle injury, if I remember correctly. And he's been a lot better defensively since then. So I think you automatically add somebody who is like a real rim protector. Like, obviously Precious Achiuwa is a real rim protector, but granted, there's a difference between being 6'9" and a rim protector and being 7 feet tall and a rim protector. So I think you add a defensive base that in some ways is going to allow them to continue to play as aggressively as they have. And the defense has been the problem. I think a lot of people in my mentions and just in general, they were like, oh, well, how's the offense going to look? I'm like, I do have questions about the offense. I think, yes, like I'm interested to see how he and Scotty are able to coexist, but also you're just adding a rotation level player to a team that lacks players that can play 20 minutes per game outside of like the seventh man. Like there's been very clear trust issues from Nick Nurse to get the most out of his bench. And sometimes I wish that he would do more, but also I get it to a degree. So I'm not too worried about that. The defenses, again, like I think I'm really interested to see what that's going to look like, because I think he provides a real base there that they have frankly lacked since they decided to go into this full wing heavy movement.
Well, it for me on defense for them, it's like the way that it's like the scheme is so over aggressive while also not having that backline protector, right? Yep. Like that's kind of what it's always come down to for me. And now they have that. Like Jakob is big. He's a physical presence inside there. He's a good rim protector with verticality. He should help them. Like I know that the numbers in San Antonio were not very good defensively for Jakob. I'm not real worried about that. Like I think so much of that is just those guards are not very good at fighting through screens and kind of hang him out to dry way too often. And the structural integrity of that defense, especially like, I don't even think Devin Vassell has had like the best year defensively for his standards while he's taken this increased role offensively. And obviously he's missed time as well over the course of the last month, it feels like he's been out.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm not worried about Jakob defensively. I think you put him around veteran players, I think he'll be fine. I think that his presence will substantially help the defense if they decide to continue down this road of playing this like wildly aggressive, hyper energetic, like disruptive, turnover forcing, havoc inducing team, basically.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think my bigger question is going to, like, I like this deal in a vacuum. I really don't think that they gave up that much. The second round picks, like, we can talk about second round picks again, just in general, but like, I'm not worried, whatever. I think this team is like at worst going to be hovering around the middle. So like, I can't be bothered about the 45th overall pick. Sorry, not to be crass or dismissive. Their own first in 2024, I think, again, like this is partially a bet on we want to be better next year. Yeah. We really believe in ourselves to be better next year. Now it actually has to happen, and they have to do the things in the summer to make it happen. But I do think this makes it more feasible and more appealing for me, especially too because it seems, at least it was reported today, that it seems likely, like they feel good about Jakob re-signing there, which means that they're willing to pay what will ultimately probably be a decent amount for him, but I think it's deservingly. So again, I'm just interested to see how it plays out.
So I'm glad that you brought up earlier, though, the idea of what does this offense look like now? I mean, their offense got somehow magically even more cluttered and messy in this deal, because for as much as we like Jakob, Scotty Barnes, like essentially playing as like the screener and roller and doing everything like that. That's a better offensive player. That's a more threatening offensive player than Jakob Poeltl at the very least. So like, I can't imagine they're going to bench Scotty, right? Like they're still going to start him. They'll probably bring maybe Gary Trent or, someone else off the bench, whoever, you want to play at the 2. And then you play like Van Vliet, Barnes, OG, Jakob Poeltl, and Siakam, right? I mean, that's just so much. It's such a lack of space on the interior for Barnes and Siakam to drive into. And for Fred Van Vliet to be like a perimeter player, it's going to continue to make OG essentially a 3-and-D guy that doesn't really have a lot of chances to attack in the way that it feels like he wants to attack.
Well, I do think one thing I would want to add on top of that, because I think that there's potential for that to be a problem. But I think what I feel better about is that he just does things really quickly. Like there's not even Scotty, I think sometimes like Scotty can make quick decisions, but I think he does have a tendency, especially when he hasn't been the screener, like he can kind of be somebody who does want to survey a little bit more. With Jakob, like, again, it's he's going to make decisions. He's going to make them quickly. And I think even if it's not necessarily spacing, like it is part of spacing, the decision-making and being quick and doing things aspect. So again, it's not the same spacing as somebody who's a 40% 3-point shooter off movement. But I do think that it has something. And I probably not that he's threatening per se, but I do probably have a little bit more belief in what he is as a just again being able to be somebody who can touch the ball and make make it go to the right places while opening things up for others. That I feel a little bit better about it than you do offensively. Again, it's just going to the Scotty and Jakob thing is what I'm going to want to see. Like, how does this look in closing lineups? How does it look in starting lineups? Because they did not trade for him I would not envision him coming off the bench.
No, they did not give up a 2024 first round pick for Jakob Poeltl to not try and re-sign him at the very least.
Exactly.
Having said that, I think where this is going is I think that they're gearing up for a star trade. I think that's my take on Toronto here. I think that they want to make a move. I think they want to position themselves to be able to get into every offer moving forward for a star. Guys, keeping OG Anunoby, for instance, I think is a really good start in that regard. We just saw Mikal Bridges be the main player along with picks in a deal for Kevin Durant. I would imagine that we see something along the lines of them trying to make a move for a star. Because that's where this roster still does not make sense. We'll see what happens with Fred VanVleet. We'll see what happens with Gary Trent, but they need more shooting. And Masai Ujiri was quoted in the press conference following the trade deadline saying, I think we need to be one of those top tier 3-point shooting teams to win in today's NBA. I think we'll get there through additions or internal growth. I mean, I don't know how you feel about the internal growth part of that, Mark, but I don't feel great about it. I mean, OG's good, but like you just spent a little bit of time canvassing the league to see if he was available and was like able to be moved. I don't know, man. I mean, this feels tough.
They're in a precarious spot. So I think they remain the team that I have probably the most questions about coming out of today. That made moves, I should say. There are teams that didn't make moves that I was like, well, what are you thinking? But yeah.
Okay. Let's go now to the Josh Hart move. This will be simpler to break down. Josh Hart goes to the New York Knicks, and Tom Thibodeau has a new favorite player.
Yeah, that was my first tweet was Tibbs is going to play in 45 minutes. This is like the Tom Thibodeau player. And my follow-up tweet was if Taj Gibson was 6'5", he'd be Josh Hart. And I personally, so what's interesting to me, like I really liked this move for them. Like they didn't really give up all that much, in my opinion. I think obviously again a lot is going to go into they'll want to re-sign him. I don't know if you saw the Jalen Brunson's reaction to the trade happening, which was cool. Obviously they played together at Villanova, so I think there's incentive for Josh to want to re-sign there too. Again, have to see it play out before we know for sure, but I think it's fascinating to me because on one hand, like I like what he brings to this roster, even if he's not shooting the ball a ton or shooting it well. Like I think he just does things that are positive. Like he can drive the basketball. He's going to make good decisions. He's a good passer. He's going to rebound the hell out of the ball, and be a very good defensive player, both on and off the ball. And that matters, especially for what Tibbs wants to do. Cause like you need guys who can cover ground and are going to cover ground correctly. And that's Josh Hart to me. Like he's so good at making rotations timely, and covering large amounts of distance. And that's, again, like, especially with the kind of defense they play, that works great. So much of the offense is you have to be intuitive. You have to move without the ball. Otherwise the offense sucks. Like that's why things didn't work with Cam Reddish. Like I think he tried very hard to make things work himself, but part of the issue with Cam is if he's not shooting the ball well, it's kind of like, okay, well, what are you getting? Like he's not really super great as a cutter. Again, that doesn't work in the offense.
Not a great decision maker.
Yeah, that's why Emmanuel Quickley and Quentin Grimes have looked good in the offense because they know how to move without the ball. And so I think what makes this just so hard for me is like, I like this move. I just get, as time continues to go on, I get like less and less enthused with Tibbs as the Knicks head coach. I know they're playing well right now. I know things are looking good, but like, I think that there is an extra gear that can happen if you remove some of the rigidity. Cause like I tweeted out a lineup yesterday. I was like, man, IQ, Grimes, Hart, insert player, and Mitch Robb is like a Voltron hustle lineup. And I had a bunch of Knicks fans like, well, Well, yeah,
Obi
exactly.
into that
I
now.
didn't.
Yeah.
I just put insert player because I was like, all right, well, you have like just 4 guys who are like nutso without the ball, and are going to play their asses off defensively. And like so I didn't even think Obi. Immediately as I had to follow up, I'm like, yeah, dude, you got to include Obi in that. But like more importantly, I was like, dude, I had so many fans be like, he's never going to play that line. I was like, you're right. Like that's part of the problem. Like I hope that we see it. I hope that because he believes in Hart that much, he's going to play him. But I think part of what I'm like, okay, well, is Obi Toppin playing less now? Is Quentin Grimes' role somehow going to decrease?
Yeah.
What does this mean? So like on the one hand, like you add a very clear rotation player who I actually think might well start for them. And like I think that's a good addition, but like what does that mean for the rest of the stuff? Are you just enabling Tibbs a little bit more to play to what he wants? So it's interesting, but I really liked it for them.
I think that so I really like this move. Eric Weiss in the comments. Shout out Eric. Just
good dude. Yeah.
Eric mentioned that he thought this was the best move of the deadline. I think it's really good. It's hard for me to get past Kevin Durant. It's the best move of the deadline.
Yes, yeah.
But I don't disagree with the idea of this being a really good move for the Knicks because I think it gives them a lot more lineup versatility as much as anything. Like Josh Hart, I think he's going to come off the bench. And the reason I think he's going to come off the bench is the weird thing that they actually quite need, despite the fact that they have these, energy players and guys who really get after it. They could use like rebounding and energy and like kind of toughness in that second unit. It feels like to me a lot of the time. Not to say the second unit isn't tough, but I do think that it will be beneficial for them to have someone that just crashes the glass constantly, right? And in that second unit as well, like they play Quentin Grimes with that second unit sometimes. Emmanuel Quickly obviously runs that second unit. Obi Toppin, they tend to use him as a floor spacer a lot of the time. Like they theoretically could have enough floor spacing in that situation to be able to accentuate Hart. Additionally, he gives them real lineup versatility for if RJ Barrett doesn't have it that night. And they've been more than willing to go away from RJ Barrett recently, if you've noticed. Like there have been a lot of lineups where it's Emmanuel Quickly, Jalen Brunson, Quentin Grimes out there with Julius Randle and Mitch. Been a lot of lineups where they've been willing to kind of experiment and see what's going on. Hart gives them a little bit more size to be able to do that. I think there are going to be games, I think, where Josh Hart closes. There are going to be games where they can go super small. Like they could theoretically, I don't know if I'd do this often, but in the right lineups could go something weird like, Jalen Brunson, Quentin Grimes, Josh Hart, RJ Barrett, and Julius Randle to close games, right? And just see what happens. Like that's a super aggressive, energetic lineup if RJ is defending. I think that's kind of been the sneaky thing that has been a bit disappointing about the Knicks this year.
Yeah, RJ's defense has been some shit this year, for being blunt.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to RJ Barrett defensively. He was good the year that they made the playoffs and won like, whatever, like the equivalent of like 48 games or whatever they won in that shortened season.
Yeah, he was on like my sub all defense team that year. He was really good in his role. I was really hopeful for what the next steps would be. I think part of the hope is like he gets back to that. And also I just need to amend myself. He's not going to start. Like I said that I forgot RJ existed for a second, which tells you what his season's been like. But like,
he's still averaging 20 points. That's the funny thing.
Yeah.
Like,
he's been better recently, but yeah, it's just like a lot of the season's been different. But I echo a lot of the same sentiments. I think just again adding somebody who fits a lot of what they want and can give them he can play 2 through 4 essentially. Like yes, and I know people are mentioning in the comments like he has the yips right now. He needs to get rid of it because like remember last year he was shooting like 6 or 7 threes a game when he had never forget the
freedom.
The Josh Hart 34% usage stretch was like, I think that was my favorite stretch of basketball last year. Like I need him to get not back to 32% usage, but like I really believe in him being like if he is confident and in the shot, that's a real starting level player. Like that's just a real player who does positive things, who has to be guarded. And I think betting on this is fine. Because again, like mentioning in the comments, like somebody said, is he really worth a first round pick? I think for where the Knicks are at right now and what they're trying to do, yes. With that pick likely being like in the late 20s, you hope that you hit and get a guy like Josh Hart in the late 20s.
Yeah. So like that pick will probably be, it's the New York pick. It's lottery protected, and then it converts to 4 seconds apparently. And let's assume the Knicks make the playoffs. I think we should assume the Knicks make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Let's say it's around like 2022, something like that. This draft class, let's say it's around 2022, or it's around 22 or so, right? Like,
I'm fine with trading out of the 22nd pick, especially too. Like
I am too.
It's worth noting too. I think this is also and part of what makes this difficult. I think part of this is the front office realizing if we draft somebody with the 22nd pick, is Tibbs going to play them? Like, is Tibbs going to make them a meaningful part of the rotation? Do we believe in them in being able to develop under Tom Thibodeau? Yep. I think that's part of the problem, but that's part of the trade-off and why you make this trade, I think.
Yep. And look, like the Nets just got worse, right? Like the Knicks theoretically are the next team up in terms of if the Nets fall out of the top 6, which I think that they're positioned to do, frankly, as we talked about earlier. I feel pretty good about the Knicks being that next team up. They're 4 games ahead of Toronto, 3 games ahead of Chicago, 2.5 games ahead of the Hawks. Those are like fairly large numbers at this size of the year. Not enormous numbers, but fairly large numbers. And Josh Hart's going to help them do that. Like, he's going to help them make the playoffs. Super smart player. I
gotta say too, especially with Miami not doing anything, that's a whole other thing. Don't get me started on that. I was very annoyed that Miami did nothing at this deadline. But yeah, like I think I'm not going to say that they can come out and get home court. Like, something would really have to go wrong for one of the top 4 teams. But I think it's very realistic that this team could end up with the 5 seed. And when you look at that, like, they have played Cleveland well this year.
Yeah.
So I think when you look at that, that's enticing for them. And I'm not saying that I would pick them to beat Cleveland, but I don't know if I'm picking Cleveland to beat them either, because Cleveland has really struggled with what the Knicks can do when they're playing at their best. So I would be, I've just enjoyed being able to enjoy the Knicks again this year. I think it's my biggest thing, because losing that last year took a small piece of my soul, because like you mentioned, the 2021 Knicks were awesome.
It was tough. It was tough last year. Okay, let's go to this weird conglomeration of Golden State Warriors moves, because the Warriors, I think, are just interesting. In a 3-team trade, the Warriors traded James Wiseman. They received 4 second-round picks, and I think they got Kevin Knox, right?
Yeah.
Atlanta gets Sadiq Bey from Detroit. Golden State gets Kevin Knox from Atlanta. No, Detroit. He plays for Detroit now. I don't know what Atlanta is sending out in that deal to get Saddiq Bey. I guess the 4 seconds, right?
Yeah,
5
I
seconds.
think it was 5. Yeah, 5, and then they sent Justin Holiday and Frank Kaminsky to Houston.
Yeah, that was just like a cap dump move, though, right?
Yeah.
Golden State then moved these, I think, 4 second-round picks. I don't know if it was those 4 second-round picks or if it was just the 4 second-round picks, along with Kevin Knox.
So many second-round picks that just went flying today.
Yeah, I know, right? But they moved all of those picks, along with Kevin Knox, to Portland in order to reacquire Gary Payton. The end result here is they basically will save something like $40 million in luxury tax payments over the next 2 years, replacing Wiseman for Payton. Something like, $5 million in terms of salary. Mm-hmm. And on top of it, they get Gary Payton II, who's a much better fit, as we saw last year, throughout the second half of the season into the playoffs before he broke his elbow, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Overall, I think this is really good business by Golden State. And essentially it's Wiseman for Payton Jr. or Gary Payton II. And Gary Payton II is a killer defender. He really fits their scheme well. He gives them something that they've lacked in terms of perimeter defense. He takes less he makes it so that Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins have less pressure on them to guard on-ball players for long swaths of time. And more than anything, this is a front office that in the past has struggled to admit when they've got something wrong. They admitted they got the James Wiseman thing wrong. They save a bunch of money and they get a better player. This feels like a really, really, really smart move by Golden State.
Yeah, I'm probably not as willing to give them as much credence for it. Like I think in the moment, smart move, but also I think part of what is frustrating is how long they sat on making this happen.
Yeah.
Like I like, of course, again, like I can't complain about a team that won a title and is trying to win one again. I'm probably, again, you and I are probably both less optimistic on that happening this year, just based on what it's been. Steph's out right now for at least past the All-Star break. But in terms of bringing in somebody who fits everything they do, like, yeah, I have no qualms about bringing him in. Can I talk about the other aspects of this trade? Because this was wild, man. I think this was the one trade that just made me go, like, I don't really like. I got it from the Golden State perspective. From the other perspectives, not so much. It was a little bit of a head scratcher for me.
Well, let's talk about the Detroit side, because I am so confused why they valued James Wiseman. Is it like the idea that they maybe just want like a rim runner 48 minutes a night?
Yeah, so that's where I got confused too. Like, worth noting, they have Marvin Bagley still. They just re-signed him to a new deal before this year. Isaiah Stewart is still there, and as some Detroit fans pointed out to me, this is not me trying to call them out, but like they pointed out, like, well, obviously Bagley's a 4. I agree. Like, he's been playing at the 4 this year when he's healthy. And Isaiah Stewart, they've been experimenting with it the 4. My issue is, okay, I think that Isaiah Stewart.
I don't think they're 4s.
Well, yeah, I mean, more importantly, defenses don't think that they're 4s. They don't act like they're 4s. They don't treat them like 4s. They can't really defend 4s. It's been a problem. Like, I think Stu does some things that I'm more interested in Stu probably than Bagley right now, just on what it's looked like. Like, Bagley can
Wiseman.
Well, I'm more interested in. I'm trying to be careful how I phrase this. I think that there is still room for Wiseman to really grow. I just don't see it here. Like, I'm very confused by why they made this move when Jalen Duran, frankly, to me, Jalen Duran was a better prospect than James Wiseman. Jalen Duran has done more in the NBA for me to be excited about his future than what James Wiseman has done. And that's not to be unfair to James. It's just telling it blank how it's been. So to me, I am confused as to why they made this move. In terms of a pure talent play, I think sure, but also I just don't really see it. Like, I don't see it working. I'm very interested to see what they try and do with it to try and make it work. Maybe they're really aggressive in getting him G League reps, but it's not even needing G League reps for him now. Like, he needs to play at the NBA level. This is a team that wants to be better next year. Like, everything that they've talked about is being better next year. It's part of the reason they kept Bojan Bogdanovic. I just, like, it's a little bit vexing to me. Unless I guess it's if they really believe Isaiah Stewart is going to become a high volume 3-point shooter that can do some of the things where he's flashed the handle and whatnot, sure. But then you talk about the overall outside Durant, and again, Durant is still working out some of the playmaking and feel aspects in the front court
and pick and roll defense, by the way. Like, Jalen Duran has not been good in pick and roll defense this year.
I think part of that too, like their overall, it's the guard plays been. Oof, but
this is what I wanted to get into. I'm glad that you just gave me that segue, Mark. Their pick and roll defense this year has been absolutely dreadful. What is the thing that James Wiseman needs most right now in order to contribute at an NBA level? What is the thing that he needs? I would argue it's competent reps in ball screens, getting that experience with guards that like fight over the top and allow him to try and figure out his positioning. He's dreadful from a positioning perspective in ball screens. Yeah. He just doesn't really know where to be yet. He gets caught in no man's land way too often in that drop. Detroit's infrastructure defensively this year, for anybody that's watched a lot of Pistons basketball, it's been a disaster. Like, it's been really, really bad. This isn't even a fit to get the most out of James Wiseman from that perspective, I think.
Yeah.
It's kind of like knowing your own personnel, right? Knowing your own scout to accentuate and make guys the best they can be, right?
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think on one hand, like I like the idea of, at least for him, I like what this could mean for like getting to play alongside a healthy Cade. I think that's interesting for Wiseman in trying to figure some things out, like playing alongside a guy who's that good with pacing and as a playmaker is going to be beneficial to you. But again, I think when you're talking about what this means for Cade, what this means for Jaden Ivey, I like he's not a good screener right now. The short roll playmaking is he's improved a little bit this year, but I think that's more so speaking on what it was in prior years than what it's at now. Again, like if they really believe in who he can be moving forward, okay. But I need to see it. Like I really need to see it play out before I feel good about what this deal is. And it's not even that they gave up a ton, but it's just in terms of like, okay, putting themselves in a position where they're on the hook with this. Like I'm interested to see how they try and make it work out.
Well, it's just like the overall vision, right? Like they want to be better next year, but then they're going out and acquiring like a pure project center that isn't going to help them next year win games. Like all due respect to James Wiseman, you're right. He still has a real chance, but like he's not going to take such an enormous leap defensively over the course of the next 12 months or 8 months realistically to where he's going to be like a genuine impact player. I don't think at the very least.
Yeah.
I don't mind the bet. In theory, I mind the team that made the bet.
Yes. Yeah, agreed.
I don't think it makes any sense for them. And if I was Jalen Durant, I'd be like, wait, what? I've been killing it. Why are you going out and getting him? Like, I've been better than him. Like I proved I was better than him at Memphis. I proved I've been better than him in the NBA, and you're going out and acquiring him. Like, what's the deal here?
Yeah. Yeah, it would be that one would be very hard to try and explain. I'd imagine that they talked to him about it. But I'm hopeful to see something change up because I am really hopeful for him because I have hated what most of the discourse is.
Around Wiseman, you mean?
Yes. Yeah.
It's a bummer. Like if you talk to anyone around the league, like James Wiseman is like a super nice guy, like a really good dude. And it's been that way since he was young. Like it's just that, it hasn't worked in any way. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Smart. Look, you can make the case that Golden State should have done all this in the offseason. I get it. But at the end of the day, they got here and all that happened in the offseason is a sunk cost at this point. So you might as well just kind of make the moves now.
Can I talk about Atlanta for a quick second now?
Yeah, please. Because the Sadiq Bey thing is interesting.
I hated it for them, for being completely honest.
Interesting. Okay.
Like, not even
Let's
just
do it.
Hate is wrong. Like, I think Sadiq is me and mutual friend Nikai Stunk were talking about Sadiq the other day. And like, I think that he's been fine. The defense has been pretty rough this year. Again, part of that is Detroit as a whole, but like he's in a really weird spot where he just is not at a point where I think he can really guard a lot of wings. Like he's pretty clearly a 4 to me. I think you can try and be aggressive with switching him, but he just gets beat so much. His feet really don't move well right now. And I mean, that's something that hasn't really improved from his time at Villanova. So that's been tough because like even just, I mean, shit, who was I watching Detroit play the other day? And it was, they just kept attacking him over and over and over again. And it wasn't just him, but like he gives up everything. And I think like he can do some okay things as a rotation defender, but he's just really slow right now. And I think arguably he's at his best when he can try and guard somebody bigger than him. And
I agree.
What's tough is so when the shot is on, it's really good. And I think playing in it just a more talented offensive team will be beneficial to him. The passing is still pretty bad. I think the overall feel as an offensive player is still pretty underwhelming to me. Yep. And if the shot's not there, like part of what made him interesting in Detroit is they really let him like, okay, be aggressive in trying to get into your post-ups because like he's really not beating people off the bounce right now. Like it's okay, even if he's attacking a closeout, it's okay, I'm attacking a closeout and then having to finish through contact because I am like, he's not really a good leaper right now. Again, he's not super fast getting downhill. I think that he's made some strides over the last year, but it's at a level where for where the Atlanta team is right now, like I think this is to me, like, I mean, he's an interesting depth 4 wing, whatever you want to call him, but like he's kind of just and I don't mean this to sound unfair, but like he's kind of just another iteration of DeAndre Hunter with less skill.
That's what I was going to bring up.
And that's like, I love DeAndre Hunter and he's been better recently, but part of the issue is like they need guys who can move the ball. Like they need guys who can really continue plays and be intuitive with the basketball and like play off of Trey and DeJounte. And that is not Saddiq like at all. And I think again, like you bring size and that's interesting defensively, but that's really the only selling point for him as a defender right now is that he's 6'7" and has a little bit of wingspan. And so I think from that standpoint, sure, like you add a rotation guy and that's fine. You get size, you get some shooting, cool. But overall, like this was mostly a cost cutting move for them, and I continue to just be
sort of. I don't know.
They
cost
jumped.
Move was the Houston deal.
They dropped Justin Holiday and Frank Kaminsky, and like again, like my point just being like I don't think that this is anything that meaningfully moves them for me. Like AJ Griffin should still be markedly ahead in the pecking order.
Totally agree.
I still think Jalen Johnson should be ahead of Saddiq in the pecking order. Like I like Jalen better as a prospect. Like Nate McMillan probably does not, but like I've been more interested in some of the stuff that Jalen Johnson's done this year, even if he's not as consistent yet, which again, that probably means that Sadiq's higher in the pecking order. But again, like this really does not do anything for me.
So the only reason that I would say I probably would go Saddiq over Jalen Johnson right now is that Saddiq is at least like confident firing from three if he gets it off the catch. This team is 29th in the NBA in 3-point attempt rate. Part of that is like the Nate McMillan archaic, gross offense, but also they need another guy that's willing to fire from three, right? And Saddiq will do that. Completely agree with you. Like if I'm them, like my starting lineup is Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, AJ Griffin, DeAndre Hunter, Clint Capella, and then I'm bringing Okongwu and Bogdan and Bey off the bench, right? And maybe even playing Jalen Johnson some minutes here and there. No, they still have John Collins on this team. Why do you still have John Collins? Like,
well, no, so exactly. That's the problem. Like they're gonna have to play him out of position at the three, and the ball movement is still gonna suck. And like, I think overall it's a positive move. Like I think that Saddiq is a fine player who I get wanting to add as a depth guy, but it just like I just don't really. I'm not trying to be unfair. This is not a situation I really like for him or for the Hawks.
Well, they'll start Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, DeAndre Hunter, John Collins, and Clint, and then it'll be Bogdan, AJ, Bey, and Okongwu coming off the bench.
Yeah,
I'm a little bit more sold on that. Like having another guy that will come in and shoot a little bit is valuable. Another guy that like sneaky will do that is Garrison Matthews if they keep Garrison Matthews. I've grown to really not enjoy watching Garrison Matthews play basketball, if I'm being completely honest.
He's a total the foul baiting from him is kind of egregious sometimes.
And like look, that guy probably has to play on the edge. Like he probably feels that way in terms of like staying in the NBA, right? Like he probably feels like he really has to do that, right? And I don't begrudge him for that. I just don't know that I enjoy watching it either, personally, and that's okay. I'm sure that other people that like college basketball enjoy it. The Atlanta thing's weird. I guess it's fine. I don't really have a problem with it like you do, because I think that at the end of the day,
it's less to have a problem. I think it's just more I continue to just really be underwhelmed by their process as an organization.
That I agree. That I completely agree with. What I will say is I think that Bey maybe gives them a little bit more depth to move John Collins in the summer, in theory, if you believe Bey is a 4, like both of us do. It also, I just don't think that they're not going to be able to move Sadiq Bey for a second-round pick if they have, like 2 seconds in the offseason if they want to, right? They'll be able to recruit most of this value if they have to, I think. So I don't know. I agree with you generally that it's not the best fit in the world, but I just don't like it's not a big deal to me. let's go to, well, the other part of this is, did they deal like 6 second-round picks today?
I think it was. Did they?
They
Did they dump
2 to
one to
Houston.
Houston? Oh, they gave 2 to Houston. So then I think they dumped 7.
Yeah.
Because I believe they traded 5 to the Warriors for Sadiq Bay.
Yeah, like that's a lot. I mean, not to like overvalue second-round picks, but like you probably get an NBA player 1 out of 7 times that you're picking in the second round if you're Atlanta. So I don't love that. Okay. Now to this weird Matisse Thybulle, Jalen McDaniels deal that happened. The Charlotte Hornets send Jalen McDaniels to Philadelphia. Philadelphia, I believe, also gets 2 second-round picks from Portland in this deal. Portland receives Matisse Thybulle from Philadelphia. And then they move Svi Mikhailuk and 4 second-round picks to Charlotte. I'll have to look while we're talking to see what the value of those second-round picks are, because I think a couple of them might be reasonably valuable. The big thing for this deal is that it's Matisse Thybulle moving on from Philly. Philly did this in part because it gets them under the luxury tax. Like Matisse Thybulle was making, I'll pull that number up while I'm talking, but he was making enough money to where I believe that this number pulls them just very slightly under the luxury tax in terms of their overall cap footprint. Yeah, they're 1.2 million now under the luxury tax after this deal. Jalen McDaniels, I think, has a case to just be a better player than Matisse Thybulle at this point. They're both free agents in the offseason.
Say point blank that Jalen is already a better player than Matisse Thybulle.
I'm intrigued to see. So Matisse has played minutes that have mattered. Jalen has not. And I'm intrigued to see Matisse in a different situation where he is like, I don't know, like he was freed up to like really go after guys defensively in Philly. I guess I'm intrigued to see it in a different situation, the defensive value. This season so far, Jalen McDaniels has been better than Matisse Thybulle, though. I agree with you.
Yeah. I think pretty unquestionably for me too. Like things have really clicked for him this year. I think he started to put some things together last year, but this year it's been really good. The confidence has been awesome from him. I think in terms of a guy who can bring some secondary rim protection, who can be, obviously he's not the same as his brother as a defender, but like he can be rangy and play out at the point of attack. He can just fill multiple roles. He does a lot of things that you want in an NBA for.
He was low cost Jared Vanderbilt for me, kind of.
Yeah. And I think especially for them, like I think he's a better fit than Jared because of his shooting ability. Yeah. One thing I am interested to see, like this is not a team that really likes to push the pace a ton. And part of what makes Jalen interesting is when you let him push the pace, like part of what exactly like you mentioned, like a guy who hasn't necessarily played a ton of big time minutes so far.
High leverage minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, okay, well, how much are they going to be willing to let him do that? Because he is somebody who really likes to take the ball from the break, and he can make some good decisions coming down and off the break. He can be a little erratic at times too, but like that's what you are trading for, like a 6th or 7th man. And I guess more 7th or 8th because Tyrese Maxey exists. But like, I think I like this because it gives them an option that is not PJ Tucker. Because I have had a lot of qualms with PJ Tucker this season. I get the playoff value ideology, but I do tend to think it's been overblown, especially last year. So I am very in on this for Philadelphia.
So I do think PJ is going to end up playing a majority of the minutes in the playoffs because I do think PJ, the one thing he does really still provide is like man-to-man, one-on-one defense against good players, right? And that is going to be really, really important for them against guys like Jason Tatum, against guys like Giannis occasionally. He's a little bit too small for Giannis, but like those guys, it's going to be really, really important for them to have PJ on some level. But I agree with you in general that having McDaniels is an interesting option. I'm glad you brought up Maxey because I think that that's actually like a really interesting synergistic combination on the bench units because you're right. They don't really like to run because they're very methodical. James Harden's very methodical by nature. Joel Embiid is very methodical by nature. Even Tobias Harris like is a little bit methodical by nature. Tyrese Maxey's going to go. Like in those second units, like if you put him with Jalen McDaniels and Tyrese, like those two could really go and like really push the pace and change the tempo of the game, change the way things run. I think that's actually kind of an intriguing move for them, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah. And then from Portland's perspective, like I guess I'm okay with taking I mean, to me, this is a flyer. Like, I don't really know that I'm not super high on Matisse as a player, if we're just being honest. Like, I get that he does a ton of cool stuff as a off-ball roamer and defender, but point of attack defense is not good. The offense is just like pretty unplayable right now. And I think part of what's vexing for me with this team is like part of the reason they trade Josh Hart is because they need a guy in the offense who is going to be able to get more shots up on volume. And I think Cam Reddish solves that equation. Hitting the shots, that's another question. But I hope that they can empower him and believe in him and are able to make that work. But like with Matisse,
that's such a substantial downgrade going from Josh Hart to Cam Reddish. We just need to be realistic about that.
Yeah,
right? For a team that like it seems like genuinely wants to make the play-in or even the playoffs potentially, it's a significant downgrade.
Yeah, I really did not like what Portland did at the deadline, to be honest. I think
so. Here's what I will ask you here now. Can you explain the difference for people between Gary Payton and Matisse Thybulle?
Oh, Gary's a better defender, if we're being honest. Like I think I was, and I'm not meaning this to seem asinine, but I was kind of frustrated that Matisse made all defense last year. I don't think it was warranted. Like the year before, I thought so, but this last year and since he hasn't been nearly.
I didn't even think so that year.
Yeah,
the year that he made it.
That one, I at least felt better because he played way more minutes. But like I think as cool as the steals and blocks are, he is out of position a ton. So like I think part of what made him work so well was getting to play alongside Ben. Like when Ben was at his best as a defender, that allowed Matisse to be just an absurd hawk off the ball. Like and that was cool.
Having Joel,
having Joel, well. Exactly. Joel's a backman, but I think to me, like Ben has always been like the better regular season defender to a degree. Obviously not this year, but that year I thought so. And I think what makes it difficult is like who on the Blazers is unlocking that for him. Like they do play a pretty aggressive scheme at times, but it's not like part of the issue is like I think you can really get burned with letting him be aggressive. Yusuf Nurkic is roaming backline and taking care of this. Like I think that he can maybe fit in and do some things, but he really needs to rein in. Like he's not a very good screen navigator in some ways. Like he's good at in rear pursuit and like tipping the ball, but it's much more as my high school football coach would say, it's scholarship tackling instead of the stuff that's actually like going to keep you playing. Like it's the highlight worthy stuff. And I'm not trying to be unfair. Like I think that there's room for it in some schemes, but like for the most part, I mean, he burns Philadelphia more often than not with how he plays defensively.
I think he's a pretty overrated defender. I think he's aggressive and he gets a lot of deflections. He gets a lot of steals. He's a good weak side rim protector. On the ball, you're right. Like he's not that good. Like he's just not. Like he is not up to that level. He's not a bad on ball defender in general, but he's not good. Like he's not like a significant plus. Gary Payton's a terrific team defender. He's a terrific on ball defender. Like one of the best perimeter on ball defenders in the NBA, along with Drew Holiday, Marcus Smart, Alex Caruso, whoever you want to bring up. The other part of this is he's a better offensive player. He moves the ball quickly. He's not a shooter. He can dribble. He can dribble. Like he grew up playing point guard. Like he can put the ball on the deck. He makes decisions well. Like he's just a more well-rounded player than Matisse Thybulle. So they downgraded going from Gary Payton to Matisse Thybulle, and they significantly downgraded going from Josh Hart to Cam Reddish. They did so at the price of picking up a first-round pick in the 20s. Okay, sounds good. I get it. Yeah, sure. Like it's just not. It's not something that's not all that interesting to me.
Yeah. So I'm just very interested to see what this means for the rest of their season. Like, do they believe in some of their prospects that much that they want to play them more? So I'm not in love with it for what season Damian Lillard's having and what their clear needs were if they wanted to be better.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the Jae Crowder move finally. He's getting his wish to go to Milwaukee after being moved to Brooklyn last night in theory. What did they get? 5 second-round picks from Milwaukee, something like that, to do this? And
Yeah.
then how many of those went to Indiana? Did any of those go to Indiana?
I think one went to Indiana, if I'm remembering correctly.
Okay, here, I've got it up now. It's 2 go to Brooklyn, 3 go to Indiana. I believe that George Hill, Serge Ibaka, and Jordan Nwora are also going to Indiana. Is that right?
Yeah, Serge got waived too about an
Yep.
hour and a half ago, I think.
So, I mean, look, it's just they traded Jae Crowder for the guys they wanted to trade for Jae Crowder to Philly. They did the same deal. They just had to add a second-round pick. And this is what Milwaukee's wanted, it feels like, the whole season. And they got their guy. Do you think that this tangibly changes things for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is actually a beneficial add, especially when you factor in that they didn't have to really give up anybody in their rotation. I think I still would have probably been okay with them making this move and trading Grayson Allen, because they have had some issues with having a bigger wing defender at times. Even though Joe Ingles has given them some good minutes, I still have a lot of questions about that further on. But yeah, I like this. I think my biggest reaction was we waited the 50 games from his Boss Man 99's cryptic tweets before the season even started to just see Jae Crowder has been traded for 5 second-round picks, and it was just funny the way that worked out.
Well, it's funny. Look, I think that Phoenix would have figured out how to do this anyway, right? They would have figured out just to add Dario Saric in this deal instead of Jae Crowder in order to make the Kevin Durant math work, right? But Jae Crowder was involved in the Kevin Durant move at the very least,
Yeah,
which is bizarre and weird. I think Jae Crowder's fine. I don't know if he completely changes the equation for Milwaukee.
He just gives them another good look. I don't think that it's anything that I'm blown away by, but he does fit something for them that I think is solid. So
allows them to go smaller more often, right? That'll be big. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. He needs to be able to shoot. He needs to be able to do a little bit more than just defend and be able to play the 4. He needs to be able to shoot. And if he can knock down shots, he'll be fine. Okay. What in the world did the Clippers do today?
They made some 2K trades.
They kind of did, didn't they? They traded 2 second-round picks to get Bones Highland. Okay, sure. Then they move John Wall, Luke Kennard, and a first-round pick swap in order to get Eric Gordon and 3 second-round picks. I don't know about you. I think Luke Kennard's been better than Eric Gordon this year. So I'm a little confused about that. What did you think about this?
Personally, I liked what they did for the most part. I would have, if I were them, I would have rather seen them be aggressive in trying to bring Mike Conley in. Clearly, Minnesota really wanted to do that, which I get. But I like getting Bones, especially at that value. I don't think that he's on the borderline of being a player who, I don't think that he can stabilize an offense right now. That's not him. But I do think part of what was exciting about bringing in Mason Plumlee, and A, they have that synergy from playing together before. Yeah. B, or actually, no, they did not play together before.
They did not, but
you have him and Zoo, and I think what's important with that, he works really well with a good screener. I think part of what's been a big issue for Bones this year in Denver is having to play with DeAndre Jordan, who just does not defenses don't care.
And Zeke Naji as well. Yeah.
Well, yeah, defenses don't care about either guy in what they're doing, and I think obviously Zeke still has to learn a lot of the nuances of screening and being a DHO partner. Bones really worked well with playing alongside DeMarcus Cousins this rookie year, having a guy who can be a good screener and pop threat. And obviously Mason and Zoo aren't pop threats, but they're bringing a ton that DJ does not have right now as a roller and as a lob threat that opens up some stuff for him as an interior playmaker, which I think is where you see some of his best stuff. So that's good. Obviously, the decision-making from him can be erratic and all over the place, which is part of the reason Denver was probably willing to move on from him. I like the gamble for 2 second-round picks. I think he's somebody who can contribute to the rotation right now and just give him another look. Eric Gordon, I'm probably on the same boat with you, but I think what makes it more interesting, like even if I think Luke's been a better player this year, I think what Eric brings fits more of what they want. It brings a little bit more of that rim pressure threat, especially off the catch. I think he's an okay pick and roll playmaker, not somebody I'd necessarily call a good one, but he just brings somebody else who can be a body out there, play what they like to do. And also gets back to where he got drafted and was awesome. Never forget, dude. Clippers Eric Gordon is like one of my favorite.
You were like 10 years old when that happened.
Okay, but I still go back and watch it. Like that was sick. He was pre-injury. Eric Gordon was awesome. Like he's still a solid player, but like I think again, he's not the same accuracy shooter. He's not the same movement shooter as Luke, but in terms of depth, in terms of volume, in terms of somebody who's not going to shy away from taking shots, that really helps. And again, adding that downhill threat, I like. And then the Mason. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, let's start with Eric, because I think that the Eric Gordon thing is interesting, if only because there's a chance he can stay on the floor defensively in the playoffs. Whereas I would guess, I'm not saying I know this, I would guess they felt like Luke couldn't really do that.
Mm-hmm.
And in that vein, I do understand this to some extent, right? Like if you really think Luke can't stay on the court in the playoffs, and you think Eric Gordon, who by the way has been really, really bad defensively for Houston this year, if you think that he's gonna take a leap now that he's playing in a system where he'll be like engaged and on it again this year, okay, like I get it. It's an interesting bet for me. I don't know. I don't know if they did enough. Like I actually think the Plumlee thing is what's going to help them the most, if I'm being completely honest with it. Like having Isaiah Hartenstein last year was huge for their offense, and having Mason Plumlee around is going to be just as big in terms of like being able to run dribble handoffs, being able to initiate a little bit from the high post like Hartenstein did last year. I would imagine that's kind of what they're envisioning with this.
Yeah. Game. Yeah, and I like that aspect a lot, like you mentioned. I think that brings a lot that I'm excited about, because he is not a good roller in my opinion, but he rolls hard as shit, and that matters. Like he plays with a freneticism and pace that they rarely ever have in the half court, and that matters. So I like that for them, especially with him being more of a backup. I believe it was reported that he's going to be the backup to Zoo. I could be wrong on that, but when I think it was Young Masuk on ESPN, so that he'll come in and be the backup. But
yeah.
So I like that because I still think Zoo is quite a bit better. My biggest thing is just going to be like Mace he's pretty cooked defensively right now. In my opinion, like he's not a rim protector. I think he's better when you play him closer to the level of the screen. I don't think that they're going to do that because they just don't really. They're like, no, we're just going to switch. It's not us. So, but overall, like I do think he brings good things. I like the moves all in a vacuum. I kind of just wish that they'd gone all out to really get a point guard instead of just getting depth. Like it's been their thing. Like they have too much depth in my opinion, continually. And that's not always a bad thing, but it's just like when you need to have somebody who can really facilitate and table set. Like again, they address some of those needs, but maybe not in the way that I was fully into them doing.
Yeah. Eric Gordon's finally out of Houston. That's nice.
Good for him, man.
Good for Eric.
Yeah. Really rough foul on his end last night. That was tough.
And he did. I want to be clear about that.
Oh yeah, I had people tell me that he didn't foul him. He touched him. Like he very clearly caught him. And more importantly, too, like any coach would tell you, don't even contest that. Like, you don't want to give that opportunity. Like if they break free of your denial, just let it go because they're not going to be able to drive. It's only going to be a 3. Just don't give him the opportunity to draw a foul, and it happened. So
yeah. No, I agree. Okay, let's go through and buzz through rapid fire some of these moves. The New Orleans Hornets get off of the Devontae Graham deal using 4 second-round picks to San Antonio and acquire Josh Richardson. My biggest fear with this move is that Josh Richardson is going to play over guys like Dyson Daniels and some of those guys. I just hope that, New Orleans does not do that, but it's a good bit of business from both sides. It feels like 4 second-round picks for Josh Richardson and, getting off the Devontae Graham deal for New Orleans.
Yeah, I think it's fine. Like, you add a guy who can handle the ball a little bit, who can shoot. I would not really call him a very good passer or decision maker. But he does bring some defensive stuff that I think that, like, obviously that's going to be the problem with Devontae. Like, Devontae has not had a great season, to be honest. Like, that's not really telling anything that people don't know. But so I think it's interesting is like a leverage play. Like, okay, we add another guy to the rotation who can be, who can play both ways. I tend to be a lot more underwhelmed with who he is as an offensive player than I think people tend to project him as. I think my biggest thing is just like, I really wish that they had been more aggressive in this. And I'd imagine that their skid with all the injuries has played a part in them not being as aggressive at the deadline. But it is a little bit frustrating to me. Like, I was really hoping that they would maybe do a little bit more here.
I think they're fine. I really
do. It's not like awful. I just kind of wish that I wish that they had looked at something. Like, I would imagine that they probably were one of the teams who was calling Toronto and decided that they weren't willing to give up as much as Toronto wanted. And I can't really have an issue with that, but it's just hard. This team was the number one team in the West before the injuries, and I think that they've flashed real top end ability. So I'm just interested to see how the rest of the season plays out for them.
They're a game out of 4th place. They're 3 games out of 3rd place. As soon as they get all of their complement of players back, I think they're going to be fine. And I'm willing to bet on the kids at the end of the day. I am. Like, I think that Dyson's going to be able to play at a really high level. I think that, Trey Murphy, I would imagine that if I was Toronto, I'd be asking for Trey Murphy in an OG Anunoby deal. And if I was New Orleans, it'd be a non-starter. Like, just straight up. I think that I would rather have Trey Murphy for 2.5 years of his rookie scale deal than OG Anunoby for 1.5 and then having to pay him an expansive amount of money. So yeah, it's going to be intriguing. Then obviously Najee Marshall's been valuable, so we'll see what it looks like. You mentioned to me offline, or maybe even, I don't know, we've been recording for 2 hours. San Antonio did not make moves. John Hollinger and I have been in a running conversation throughout the last month trying to figure out what salaries San Antonio was going to take on for draft capital, essentially. Ish Smith for $4.75 million for Denver would have saved them like, I think, $14 million in luxury tax payments. San Antonio didn't take them on for some reason. I think it's because the Nuggets probably moved most of their 2nd round pick capital remaining in that Thomas Bryant deal to get a backup center, which is a choice in and of itself. We'll talk about that momentarily, but I don't know, man. Like, I'm surprised that San Antonio didn't go out and get draft capital, if only because, they're $15 million away from the floor. It doesn't cost them anything. Like, it does not even cost them money to do this. You just do it.
Yeah. I was kind of a little bit surprised too. Maybe this partially goes into what we were talking about last week about teams having more reluctance to trade guys on expirings. But yeah, I was expecting them to be more of a player at the deadline. And I think it is interesting too, because like you mentioned with draft capital, like they have a ton of draft capital moving forward still. Yeah. And they have a lot of guys who are young and trying to develop right now. So I do wonder, not that there was hesitancy to like add to that, but I don't think OKC's way of building is forever. And that's not me trying to shame it, just for OKC fans right now. But like, it is a lot easier said than done to develop that many guys at the same time and see what comes out of it. So I am interested just to see, how they approach the summer too. But yeah, agreed. It was kind of weird to see them be so like not even like trying, like what if they'd gone out and been like, well, we'll do the Justin Holiday and Frank Kaminsky trade. Like, we'll take on your salary, give us an extra second. Like, that's the kind of thing where I would have expected them to be more aggressive in doing that. But
yeah, for instance, like Eric Williamson in the comments brought up that the Nuggets traded Bones, so they need Ish Smith. I mean, they can't play Ish Smith in the playoffs. Like, no. I mean, it's just It's just not going to happen. And if it does, it's going to be a mess for them. Like they'll play Bruce Brown as their primary initiator, I would imagine. Speaking of the Nuggets, they do acquire Thomas Bryant. Look, Thomas Bryant's not going to help them on defense. The defense has been really, really bad, but he does give them a shooter and give them like a real offensive center off the bench, which will help in some regard at least.
Yeah, I think they have the size across the board to be willing to play him some minutes too.
Yeah.
So I'm not too worried. Well, ironically, like that's the exact kind of guy that I would want to see play with Bones.
Yeah,
which is hilarious, but
yeah, I agree.
Funny how things work.
The Bruno Fernando rim runner era ends in Houston. If you remember, they started Bruno Fernando over Alperen Şengün at the start of this season because Kevin Porter Jr. is better with a rim runner than he is with a dominant, like passing and scoring, rebounding big. Who would have thought that? I certainly would have. I'd imagine that as much as anything, this was a take the club out of the bag trade for Steven Silas for when Kevin Porter eventually gets back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That whole thing is...
Shout out the Houston front office.
Yeah. What an odd time.
Okay. One more. Mike Muscala goes to Boston for Justin Jackson and 2 second-round picks. This is like sneaky one of the really smart moves.
Yeah, I think it's good. Like I think you can, if they are, I mean, you're gonna have to play a drop with him for sure. But I think with what he brings as a shooter and just a guy who has size and will be in the right places, can't go wrong. Like I think that's been sneakily one of their biggest issues has been a third big.
Yeah,
and without just unsureness of uncertainty of either Al or Rob being healthy, I think you have to have a break glass in case of emergency guy for deeper playoff rounds for sure. And more importantly, too, just for added depth, like, okay, we don't have to play Blake Griffin anymore. That's a win. No offense to Blake. He was actually really good last night.
Made 5 threes last night, baby.
Yeah. It was his audition to say, don't trade for Mike Muscala. And they said, we're going to do it anyways. But I mean, exactly. Like you add a guy who brings that very proven pop threat that I think really unlocks things for their offense. I love it for them. Odd to see him out of OKC.
Yeah. Mike Muscala this year in minutes for Oklahoma City. Do you know what their net rating is?
I don't know, actually. I'm thinking probably
plus
pretty
8.6.
Yeah.
They are quite good with Mike Muscala on the court because their offense with his floor spacing ability just explodes. 119.2. He will be really helpful for Boston in that regard. Another really, really high level shooter for the Celtics. Okay. That's it. We got through them all, Mark. I don't know. Do you want to save the spider story for next time, or do you want to jump? I don't know. What do you think?
I kind of want to hear it. I'll be honest.
Okay. So, as you know, spiders all over the place here in Australia. Mm-hmm. And I walk into my garage one day, and my wife is an expert. She grew up here. She knows what to expect, right? We see spiders in the house like fairly regularly, like, once or maybe 3 times a week, right? Mm-hmm. I'll see like a random spider. Probably will kill it most of the time. Mostly because I don't know which ones are dangerous, which ones aren't dangerous. Laura can like look at it and immediately tell me that one's the one you have to kill, or no, that one's the one that helps you, right? So I walk into the garage. Mm-hmm. I look up on the wall next to our car. I see a spider. I swear to God, Mark, it is as big as like a college diploma.
Oh God.
Like it is an enormous spider. And I go, Laura, what in the entire fuck is that? And she goes, oh no, that's a good one. You can't kill that one. That kills the actually dangerous ones. And I'm just like, wait, what now? This thing is like a third of the size of our dog. Like, look, we have a small dog. Don't get me wrong, but this thing looks like it could like cause problems for our dog in a fight. How is that one the one that kills things? She's like, yeah, it's not. She's like, it's not dangerous. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's all good. Like, those are the good spiders. I'm just like, wait. So you're telling me I can't kill this spider?
Yeah.
It's literally like, it looks like it could cause our dog problems in a fight, and you're telling me not to kill it. And she's like, no, it'll go away, or it'll kill something good, and we'll be very happy with it. Where do I live, Mark? Like,
the worst place that's ever existed, as far as I'm concerned. I'm staying so far away from this. That is not for me.
it's also the best. Like, I'm ecstatic to live here. Like, it's my favorite place. The city of Melbourne is like my favorite place on planet Earth. I'm so grateful and lucky that I get to live here. The spiders are something I will never get behind. Like, I lied down to get into bed 3 nights ago, and a spider crawled out of like the pillowcase of my pillow. And I was like, I think I might have to burn the pillow now.
Hell no. I am not here. No. Yeah, that's awful. I would.
Yeah.
Ooh, I remember my sister lives in Alabama, right? And Tuscaloosa is only like, it's like, could be a lot worse in terms of how like, I mean, it's humid, of course, but like, it's not like next to well, there are lakes right by it, but like where she lives in it is not right next to the lake. But I just remember one of her apartments that she lived at there, it was a nice apartment, but like, you just can't keep bugs out in the South. And I woke up one morning to a cockroach that I think was at least like 4 inches, 3 or 4 inches long on my door. And I just like, I didn't notice. So my dog like jumped off the bed, and I'm like waking up, and he's just like staring at something on the door, and is like trying to paw at it. I'm like, what the fuck are you looking at? And I put my glasses on. I'm like, oh God. And yeah, so that I can't handle that. If I saw a spider that big, oh man.
It was like high up the wall, but I don't know, man.
No, I can't with that. That doesn't work for me.
That shit's fucked up. Okay. I've not watched any movies really, so I've got nothing on that front. Do you have anything you want to dive into?
No, I'm good on my end.
Yeah. Okay, Mark, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on in your life.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at MG_Schindler. I'll be working on a couple bigger projects. So I'm hopefully, well, no, not hopefully. I need to be kind of offline until probably Tuesday. So
yeah,
catch up with me then. But yeah, man, I appreciate you as always for having me on it. This was a very fun 2 hours. I had no idea it was 2 hours until you said it was. So
it's the best. It's absolutely the best. Go to The Athletic. I wrote 2,500 words on Kevin Durant last night in a fugue state when I was like half asleep. I wrote 5,000 words on the crazy Lakers, Wolves, Jazz deal. I will have a bunch more words coming. I think I might write about the Josh Hart deal because I really, really like that for the Knicks in some regard, as we talked about here. Might have a couple other things randomly coming. That's all I've got, guys. I'm tired. We'll have more on this next week. We'll have Spinella on Sunday. I've got Samson Folk queued up to talk about what in the world the Raptors are doing moving forward for next week at some point. That's what I've got. Until next time, man, we'll talk soon.